Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Success Insight podcast. Our guest today is John Sardella. John is the author of A Journey Without a Map, Stories of Loss, Grief, and Moving Forward. After 27 years of marriage, John lost the love of his life when his wife, Margaret, passed away following a 7-year battle with cancer. John looked for a book that would give him space for his pain and inspire him to move forward. But all he found were clinical books written by psychologists. This is a topic that is so pertinent today in how we can find resources and help us navigate these very heartfelt journeys that we're on. And I'm so excited, John, to have you on the Success Insight podcast to talk about your journey and the book and where you're at today.
Well, thank you, Howard. I appreciate the invite to be on your podcast. I'm excited about it. I'm excited to talk about the book, and I'm excited to share with the listeners so that they can have some insight if they're going through a very difficult time and how I can help them.
Fantastic. John, just to give our listeners a little context about your background, can you take us a little, maybe like the 30,000-foot view? I mean, you've got quite a career behind you. If you could share a little bit with our audience about that.
Sure. The interest in becoming an author started over 30 years ago. I was in education and I always thought about writing books, but I never really thought it was possible for me to do it. And when I became an educator and I was teaching elementary school, we used to have a lot of children's authors come and talk to the kids and work with the kids. And with some of them, they were very complex and they were very high level type of books. But there were others that were very simplistic. And I said, jeepers, I can do that. I could probably write a book. Well, at the same time, I was coaching lacrosse and being part of that sport, and I was running a youth league. And in the youth league, I got the opportunity to talk and consult with many people all over the country about starting a youth program. And so what happened from there, I used to send my bylaws and talk to them about it. And I actually put together a manual that I used to distribute and used to send out to all these different organizations. From there, I knew I wanted more. Besides doing a manual of how to start a successful youth lacrosse program, I wanted to do more of something that was educational for kids. So I had the opportunity to do Ellis for lacrosse. There wasn't any young children books out there for lacrosse that really talked about just the terms, the concepts. So I did one. And I hooked up with a great illustrator and we put together this book. It was sponsored by U.S. Lacrosse and it was distributed and sold nationally through their organization. And it was a really neat experience.
Fantastic. Now, is this book still available if folks are interested, or have you made any updates to it?
The only update is I made an e-formatted book because the original publication is out of print now. So it is an ebook and it is on Amazon if anybody has the interest. And it has just the simple terminology with the pictures and the illustrations. And if somebody's interested in lacrosse, they probably would really enjoy it and want to download that.
Fantastic. And we'll definitely put links back to both books as well in the ebook. I am curious with the lacrosse book and your experience as a coach for lacrosse for these many years, 30-some years. Do you have kids that come up to you and either they've read the book, they use the book, they meet you and say, wait a minute, you sound familiar. Didn't you write a book on lacrosse? Or they've seen you after all these years and say, God, Mr. Sardella, you were my lacrosse coach. You ever get any of that?
Oh, I get a lot of that, as a matter of fact. I had two stories I want to share really quick. One was I was just at home one day about 2 years ago, and in the mail, I received a letter from a student in New Jersey. And the letter was it looked like it was an assignment with in class. I think he was in first or second grade. And he wrote that Ellis for Lacrosse is his favorite book, and how he just loved the game of lacrosse. And he was so excited to be able to write me as an author. So I received that. And now this is after it's been published for over 15 years. And I received that letter out of the blue. And I right away wrote back to the child and I wrote back to the class. I sent him a little mini lacrosse stick. And I'm sure when the child opened that up, when he received that in class, he must have been very excited because what I got in return, I received a note from the teacher directly to say thank you and how excited not just he was, but also all the kids in the classroom. So I do get reach outs occasionally with the book still, and that always excites me because lacrosse is a unique sport that I have a passion for, and it's my way to affect students more than just being on a lacrosse field.
As you were sharing that story, my mind went back to Harry Potter and when he gets his first Quidditch broom. It's like the greatest thing in the world. And everybody is like, oh, wow.
Well, you know how little kids are when they're 6 and 7 years old. They must have been ecstatic.
Right.
I get this often. But even just this past weekend, I drove from Naples up to Tampa to watch one of my former players that I coached play lacrosse up in Tampa at Tampa University. And I didn't tell anybody. I surprised him. I surprised his family. And when he saw me in the stands, he was so excited. He was like, hey, there's Coach Sardella. And then afterwards, I was able to hang out with him and talk with him. And that's the power of connections. And that's related. That's a piece of my book that I have nowadays that I just wrote. And it's about the connection with people. And lacrosse, there's many connections that I have like that. It's, as of yesterday, I talked to a former player that I coached back in 2012, and we won a championship together. And it was just a great conversation to catch up, see how he's doing. He's, teaching, he's sharing me his life, he's making a difference. And it's just a special connection that just keeps going and going. And I have other players that connect with me and talk to me. And on my Twitter site, I always try to take pictures. I share it out so that people can see this player is now 37 years old talking to his former coach. That's pretty special. And it just shows the power of connections.
Yeah, power of connections, the legacy, the impact, and in ways it's just like having a unique family.
Yes.
You're all a part of this team, and that's wonderful. Now, if we could shift gears just a little bit. So you've spent a career in education. Let's talk a little bit about your wife, Margaret.
Sure. Well, what happened was I was going through my world of being a principal at the time. And back in 2010, my wife ended up getting diagnosed with, they noticed there was a node in her abdominal area. And that node, in turn, after testing, turned into cancer. And it was called a neuroendocrine tumor, which was the same type of cancer that Steve Jobs had with Apple. And what happened is the doctor said, it's a slow-growing cancer. We'll be able to control this and you'll live for a very long time. Well, what happened, we went to Dana-Farber for a clinical trial because it was such a unique cancer. She was on stabilizers. And as she was on stabilizers, she was living a normal, active life just like anybody for the first 3.5 years while she battled the cancer. After 3.5 years, it ended up turning into, it metastasized to the liver. And then things changed because now it became a focus of cancer in the liver. And for the next 3.5 years, she ended up being on 9 different treatments because they couldn't operate on it. And she ultimately succumbed to it once she was done with the treatments. But to talk about my wife, she was a wonderful person. She was a person of strong faith. She was a person who understood the importance of family. She was a person who had great friends around her. And she just was a special person to me with unconditional love and just a kind, caring person to me, my children, our children, and all the people around her. She was a very special person.
Sounds like it. In that span of time, I'm curious about the work or the research that you perhaps both did to come to terms with the fact that, okay, my wife has cancer. Margaret thinking, okay, I have cancer. I need to do something about this. I need to live my life. What types of activities were you involved with to at least help introduce some normalcy to what is a very trying experience? I mean, what did you do?
Well, the first thing that we did is we try to keep our life as normal as possible throughout the whole 7 years of the battle. We try to have a mental mindset of positivity and try not to talk about it publicly. We kept it close to the vest. But most importantly, as my good friend Mike Lacombe said to me, and he happens to be somebody I got to become great friends with back in middle school, but he became a radiologist oncologist. And what happened was He said, don't be a victim to the disease. You control the disease. And we took that to heart. And as we moved forward, it was really not as much going into activities, but it was trying to live our life as normal as possible, normal routine. She was a teacher. She continued to teach. I was a principal. I continued to be a principal. I coached. I continued to be a coach. And we supported our kids in everything that they did. So therefore, what we did was we had the mental mindset of saying, we're not going to be victims to this. We're going to just try to keep this as normal as possible and try to control it the best we can. And that's how we move forward.
Okay. One of our previous guests on a Success Insight podcast was a woman and fellow coach, Kellyanne McKnight, and she wrote a book called The Resilience Way. And her husband was the one who was diagnosed with cancer and a condition that was not treatable. And she noticed this idea of resilience. How do you stay resilient in the face of this adverse kind of event that can be very trying physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually? I'm wondering, just to kind of tie the two threads together between Kelly and her book, Resilience Way, and in your book, where did resilience come into the equation? Or did it? Maybe it didn't, but is this something you think was a part of the journey you and your wife had together?
Well, the resilience was the fact that we were very grounded people and that we had a very balanced life. Our spirituality was very strong. We were of Catholic faith and we went to church often. We had a great relationship with our priest. My wife, as she was getting towards the end, was going to Mass daily and connecting with our priest on a daily basis, and she put her faith at the forefront. Our family was there to support us and be part of what we were doing and what we were going through. But they also try to give us space and let us have normalcy too. And our friends were the same way. And when you go through this, you also find out who your friends are. And as you go through this, there's friends that disappear and there's friends that rise to the challenge. And then on top of all that, you still have to have your integrity and you still have to have who you are and be real as a person. And we did that. We literally took it day by day. I didn't look to tomorrow. I looked at the day in hand. My wife and I did that. And we focused on our kids and we focused on what was important. And so resilience really was led by the balance of our life and all the components we knew that were important. We kept our life simple, but it was powerful.
When did the book, A Journey Without a Map, start to enter into contemplation? Like, did you think about it at the beginning? When did that start to percolate as an idea?
I'm glad you asked that question because it really didn't percolate into an idea until about a year ago when I connected with my publisher. Because what I wanted to do is I always knew I was going to write another book. And it was going to be completely different from anything that I have ever written before. What I thought it was going to be was it was just going to be a compilation of stories, powerful stories of connections and making a difference in people's lives or people making a difference in my life. When I worked with the publisher, they actually said, your story is you, John, and it's your journey with your wife. Now, one of the stories was A Journey Without a Map. Another story was walking on Binney Street, the street that's connected to Dana-Farber, and we always ended up on that street. The stories that were threaded throughout this book were actually some of the individual stories that I was going to write about. But the common thread ended up being was the battle that we endured for 7 years and then the 3 years afterwards, after her cancer. The story ended up threading together beautifully because it took stories like a former player who reached out to me after my wife died and said, Coach, you always were there for me. Now I'm here for you. And that was the connection chapter. Another one was the connection that I had with my coach that I worked with, who was 20 years younger than me, but his life paralleled my kid's life because he lost his mother when he was young. And then, of course, my buddy who was the doctor, Mike Lacombe, I call him La. And La is a person who I knew since 8th grade. We played basketball together. Our basketball picture is in the book, and I share that. And the connection that I have with him today is as strong as it was, if not stronger, than it was almost 50 years ago. what I did was I was able to thread the stories within this book. And the stories were not every story I could use because it didn't really connect with the book, but most of them did. And the common theme of being my wife in the battle that we went through together and my wife did individually, and those people around us became what it is now, a journey without a map.
Fantastic. And what would you want your readers to take away from the book? Is there a set of actions? Is there ideas, things to ruminate on? What is the action that you would like your readers to take?
Well, the one thing I didn't want to do is this is a 7-step program for trying to battle grief. I didn't want to do that, but what I wanted to do, and through all the years of being a leader and reading, I always read inspirational type of books or leadership books. I love John Wooden. I love reading any leadership book that talks about the power of relationships and connections. And so what I wanted to do through this book is to be able to share my story, but also give people hope and inspiration at the end. And also to have them think about, if you're going through a difficult time, what is going to be your legacy upon completion of that time? My message to others was, you're not alone in this. You're going to go through a lot of challenges in your life. You're going to go through a lot of struggles, but it's really how you deal with it and how you respond to it, and that you can do that. It also gives perspective of how to communicate and work with others. It talks about that every connection that you make is not the same. It's different for everybody. It's not, this is the right way. It's just the way that worked for me. Sharing it out really talks about the most important things. The importance of faith, family, friends, having integrity, trying to have balance in your life, but a lot of that is connected to the connections and the relationships that you have. And if you have great relationships and great connections with others, it's amazing how far that can take you.
Very true, very true. Of the folks that have read the book, and I know it was recently published, and I mean, how cool. It was published in paperback on February 14th, Valentine's Day. Did you plan that, by the way?
No. That's all about the publisher.
No, they must have planned it. I was looking at it and I'm thinking, now that is pretty cool. That's pretty cool. What are people that you have come across, perhaps maybe they read the beta versions of the book, or maybe they just picked it up and they saw it. And what are they saying to you about it?
They're saying that there's parts of it that are gut-wrenching because it's a real story. But they also say the power of understanding what we went through, that it gives them more insight, but also the power of the inspiration and the motivation and how to keep moving forward. I get that. I have received information back from people consistently about that. Wow, that's an emotional read. But wow, what a powerful message that you deliver. And I'm very happy because that was the whole goal of the book. In addition to that, though, it's provided me the opportunity with some people who haven't even read the book but understand the premise of the book to reach out to me already and say, John, I lost my wife 3 months ago. I need to talk to you. And I connected with somebody from out of Maryland, out of the Baltimore area. And this is a person I have never spoken to before in my life. Within 3 minutes, it felt like we knew each other for over 20 years. And the power of understanding each other and the conversation just became real immediately was powerful. And as much as I know that I'm helping somebody else out, that's also helping me out. It's that mentor-mentee relationship. But sometimes, as much as the mentee benefits from it, the mentor sometimes can even benefit more from it. And so that's what I'm getting out of it.
Oh, it's the two-way street there. I was thinking too with Kellyanne, Resilience Way. Bill Funnemark was one of our early podcasts last year. His book was Last Lunch, about the loss of his wife. Different circumstance, but totally unexpected. And some way to bring you all together to have a conversation and a dialogue. Maybe we'll do it on this podcast. Who knows? But That'd be a cool idea, because this is some of the common threads in this podcast is some of these topics are showing up again and again. And it's like, okay, there's something going on here, something special, and we want to do something about it. So if you're up for that, we'll see if we can make.
I would love to do something like that. One thing that you find when you go through this experience, and this is anybody, whether they've gone through a divorce or whether they've gone through a loss of a child, whether they've gone through a loss of a spouse, or anybody they've been close to, they understand each other. So I understand people who've lost a spouse, and we have an instant connection. But people who have maybe gone through a divorce understand divorce better with other people who've gone through divorce. So it's really powerful. And the conversation is always real, Howard, always. There's no fluff to it. It's just real every time.
I can only imagine. I'm curious too, you worked with Lioncrest Publishing. How was it to work with a publishing house to help you bring this book to fruition?
It was fantastic. We have worked together since last April, and it's going on 10 months now, and they have guided me through every step of the way. It was a partnership writing this book, so there was constant dialogue. We would go through one idea at a time, whether I was writing it and they were providing me feedback and rewrite, then they would give suggestions. It was a powerful progression. And what I loved about it was they're very well organized to the point where they literally take it step by step with you. And when it comes to the final product is done in a quality way. It was an outstanding experience. I would do it again in a heartbeat.
And that actually begs the next question. Now, well, the book is just out, so let's give it time to percolate out on the internet and get the accolades, give you a chance to do some speaking engagements and book readings, which I'm sure you'll do. What do you think will be next for you on this journey as an author?
I'm not really sure, but I have some ideas percolating out there. I've thought about just doing a leadership book that's related to educators, trying to help and support administrators in the educational realm because of the way education is going and the mandates of education and the way the government has gotten more involved all over the country, and how you navigate through that, because you still have to be a leader, but leaders are different today than they were even 10 years ago, because there is so much power in the voice of the people you're leading. So I've thought about doing some kind of book of leadership. I've thought about doing something that's related to coaching. I've thought about simple, funny books, about golf, because I'm not a great golfer, but I love golf. But try to give perspective from my viewpoint of trying to make that putt for a bogey, which turns into a triple bogey, and what that is all about, but how it relates back to life. So I have some ideas percolating. I'm just not sure what direction that I'm going to go. I really am trying to embrace this book and let this book evolve. And then off of this, I'm wondering if maybe something comes out of this. What's my next 10 years?
I really believe, this topic is so transferable to in a number of venues, churches, synagogues, et cetera, faith organizations, community. And I would suspect sharing this journey with others could be a great way to kind of keep this book evolving for you. And who knows? If whatever you do in your next book, you had mentioned earlier about golfing, and I know you're a lover of golf, a prolific golfer. You're not in upstate New York. You're down in beautiful Naples, Florida, and you're enjoying the golf course. So that's the beauty of golf. It's a walking sport, and you have plenty of time to think about it.
Yes, it's actually very therapeutic for me. I love to go out when it's in the afternoon, and sometimes I'm just by myself and I go play 9 or 18 holes. And the serenity of a golf course is so peaceful but calming. And I love to just go out and watch the sunset as I'm hitting the golf balls, palm trees all around me. I'm in shorts and a golf shirt. It's perfect. It's beautiful.
You're making me slightly envious, but well, listen, John, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. And if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where are the best places for them to go?
The best place is to go to my website, johnsardella.com, and it has a way that they can connect with me. They can send me email requests, or they can just connect with me that way. They can also go to my LinkedIn page, John Sardella, and they can also go to my Twitter page, A Journey Without a Map, at Sardella_John.
Fantastic. And we will most definitely provide links back to your webpage, Twitter, LinkedIn, as well as the book page on Amazon. And we'll also provide a link back to Lioncrest Publishing. John, I know you've got a couple kids. What do the kids say about Dad, the author?
Well, they're supportive. This book has been kind of difficult because of the storyline and what it's all about. And they actually share in the book. They're in chapter 3, where it talks about those left behind. The power of it was it opened up dialogue with my kids. And we had some powerful conversations. They've been very supportive of it. They want to see me move forward. They want to see me enjoy life. They want to see me be active and do things. And so I have 3 wonderful kids that have really made a difference in my life. They have been a huge focus of my life, and they are proud of their father, and they want me to keep going.
That is fantastic. And kudos to them. And I'm sure they are fantastic kids as well, doing some great things. And once again, John, thank you so much for spending part of your afternoon with us. I know it's 4 o'clock in Chicago, which means 5 in Naples. I don't know if you're going to get any golf in this afternoon, but I want to thank you for spending time with us today. Our listeners are really going to enjoy it.
Well, I appreciate it, Howard. Thank you very much for having me on, and I really enjoyed my time.
All right, folks, we have just been chatting with John Sardella. His book is A Journey Without a Map, Stories of Loss, Grief, and Moving Forward. I truly hope you appreciated that this podcast episode resonated for you. One thing about this topic, we're all affected by it in some shape or fashion at some point in our lives. And, grief, bereavement, parenting, relationships, love, loss, faith, family, friends, and just life in balance. And as John said, the importance of relationships. And just a really great episode today talking about John's journey and his work as an educator and as a loving husband, and his late wife, Margaret, and just the journey that they two faced together during this battle with cancer. So we hope you enjoyed it and get some insight from this podcast. Please do let us know on our podcast page, successinsightpodcast.com. We also have pages on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube, and we're also on the major podcast channels, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. Anywhere you can just comment and we'll get notified of it. And we'd love to hear what you think about today's episode and any comments you have. Perhaps you even have somebody in your life that has gone through something similar to John and perhaps has a book in them. Well, we'd love to consider having them on the podcast as well. So again, another great episode, and I do hope you enjoyed it. This is Howard Fox. You've been listening to the Success Insight podcast. And remember, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there and have a phenomenal day. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.